What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video. And today we're going to be doing our first standard video on a specific deck in quite a long time. I mean, I really have not touched standard format since the beginning of the 2020s, and I think that standard was kind of in a bad place for a long time. I think it just recently started to get good. And honestly, with the World Championship wrapping up just a few weeks ago, I'm a believer in it now. I absolutely love the standard format. I've been enjoying playing on Arena. I've been enjoying the limited formats. It's been awesome, and I'm willing to introduce standard back into my repertoire of formats that we look at, which kind of extends to all of the competitive formats supported by the RCQ kind of trial and everything that will qualify for the regional championship. So if you're interested in any of that content, looking over the modern, standard, and pioneer format, as well as some other longer form videos, please consider subscribing and ringing that notification bell so you know when videos get posted. It's a free, easy way to support me and my content. And if you would like to go even further to support me, I have a link in the description down below to my Discord server. You can feel free to join over there. I will also have the Casual Spikes Podcast official YouTube channel linked down there as well. I'm going to be working on getting some art hopefully done by yours truly, because I'm just the massive artiste, and I think that'd be really cool to kind of do it until we end up getting popular enough for other people to do it. But I appreciate it if you would subscribe over there as well, so as we will be posting the Casual Spikes podcast over on that channel officially this week. And of course, I want to thank the sponsor of the channel, Mana Traders, which is a subscription-based service that you can use to rent cards on Magic Online that you can use to then play in some of the challenges and leagues. And of course, the free tournament actually sponsored by Mana Traders. So if that's something that interests you, follow my link in the description down below. You'll get 5% off your monthly subscription. I want to thank you again for supporting me, Mana Traders. It's been pretty cool, honestly, and something that I've been definitely working for since posting it to YouTube again, starting a few years. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead, look at this Gruul Prowess deck. This is the deck that was the most registered archetype in the World Championship. Now, spoilers, there was only one copy that was in the top 8 because there was also a mono red deck. And I think from kind of the onset of that tournament and how everything played out, we know the mono red player, Quintanoli, was very close to beating Marcio Carvalho in the semifinals and making it to the finals of the World Championship, where I think Javier Dominguez is probably playing, so I might have been able to win anyway. But mono red has been kind of the deck that a lot of players have been gravitating towards too. I've kind of moved away from Gruul Prowess and moved more onto the mono red aggro decks because there's some kind of neat play there. And I think we kind of see a lot of the Gruul Prowess decks being more of a red deck, and then having these green cards that allow it to do some pretty nifty things, in all honesty. So something that we've grown accustomed to from just playing red in general and playing red aggro decks in the format is this card, Heartfire Hero. We see it a lot in, well, not really a lot in Pioneer, but it was kind of the really good one drop in the Rakdos aggro decks that we had in Pioneer, and then kind of what we see now in Standard, where it's a 1-mana 1/1. It has the Valiant ability. Whenever it becomes a target of a spell ability you control for the first time each turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. When it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. Gets around hexproof, so you can just dome your opponent for tons and tons of damage. Of course, we had seen this with Callous Sellsword / Burn Together, the adventure half of it, to where we could just throw it at our opponent, and then we end up getting twice the damage done from it because of Heartfire Hero's ability and from the card Burn Together. That is not happening here. We're just using this as a really good one-drop creature that is going to benefit from us targeting it with various different effects. We see cards like Bushwhack here, where target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Heartfire Hero is going to get that +1/+1 counter from that, and then be able to fight whatever it is. It's going to be pretty good. And some of those mirror matches where you could just play a Heartfire Hero on turn 1, they play their Heartfire Hero, you end up bushwhacking it, you can get the +1/+1 counter on this fight. Their thing is going to deal damage to you, but you're also going to have a 2/2 when it's all said and done, and you'll be able to leave up mana on your turn to cast something like a Might of the Meek to be able to give it another counter if your opponent ends up trying to play Shock on it, which we see seeing play a lot more than we had kind of in the past. More of the cards Monastery Swiftspear is probably the worst one drop of the two in the deck, just because you're playing cards like Manifold Mouse that care about targeting a mouse you control and giving a double strike or trample on a turn. That's why we also see Emberheart Challenger here, just a really aggressive 2-drop, 2-mana haste prowess creature that is going to end up getting you a little bit of card advantage, as you play through the game when you target it. Of course, this ends up being really good when you have something like Manifold Mouse on turn 2 into Emberheart Challenger on turn 3, because you're able to hit a land, you're able to play it, and you have a lot of 1-drops in the deck as well, between, 8 creatures here, and then you have Bushwhack, Might of the Meek, Monstrous Rage, Shock, Snakeskin Veil, those sort of things. Snakeskin Veil being a little bit worse than, obviously, any of the other pump spells and stuff you see here, just because you want to kind of use this defensively to be able to essentially counter a removal spell. But it's still pretty good just putting a +1/+1 counter on a creature. Again, just getting to kind of pump something like a Emberheart Challenger, or even maybe a little bit smaller of a Heartfire hero out of range of something like a Cut Down, which we see more increasingly in the format, as well as like Anoint with Affliction and other cards like that. We see Questing Druid. Questing Druid was kind of the answer for a lot of these Gruul aggro decks to kind of keep up with some of the other mid-range decks. It was kind of a hedge where you either were kind of all in on being super aggressive, and then if the game went longer than, say, like turn 4 or turn 5, you probably weren't going to be in a very good position. But in Questing Druid kind of gets to like hedge our bets a little bit. It ends up being a 2-mana 1/1. Whenever you cast a spell that's essentially not green, you get put a +1/+1 counter on the Questing Druid, and you can Seek the Beast, paying 2 mana to exile the top 2 cards of your library, and until the end of your next end step, you may play those cards. So this kind of gets you some card advantage. You cast this on the end of your opponent's turn, and then that allows you to have access to 2 extra cards while also having the Question Druid on an adventure. So you're able to ideally play a land from exile, play the Questing Druid, play another 1-drop. You end up making this a 2/2. And if your opponent doesn't have an immediate answer for it, it's just going to kind of grow out of control. And with cards like Monstrous Rage, where you're going to be able to give a creature the Monster Roll token, which is going to give that creature +1/+1 and trample, on top of just Monstrous Rage also giving that creature +2/+0 until end of turn. This ends up dealing a ton of damage, and is definitely a spell that you can use very aggressively. And while we talked about Questing Druid kind of being this card that helps you to be a little bit more like grindier, I would say more willing to play a long game, even though you don't necessarily need to play a long game, you also have a card like Screaming Nemesis, which is a 3-mana 3/3 haste creature that whenever it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any other target. And if a player was dealt damage this way, they can't gain life for the rest of the game. So we've seen kind of the Golgori mid-range decks. They're able to make food tokens with their Restless Cottage. They're able to gain life with Frillback. It seems like that Frillback is kind of seeing like 1 to 2 copies in the main deck. Things like the Virtue of Persistence as well, giving a creature -3/-3 and it gaining some life. While that's definitely going to be a pretty potent removal spell thanks to like Screaming Nemesis, and you can throw cards like Shock and not ideally Lightning Strike. We would see in like some of the mono red versions, we would see some of the other like Witch Stalker whatever that would end up dealing 5 damage to target creature, and it would cost less for each attacking creature, which you would kind of see thrown at Screaming Nemesis's to be essentially like a lava axe to the face here. But nonetheless, like this is still a very good creature. It's definitely interesting because like this does in a way trade up. Your opponent has a 6/6, they block the Screaming Nemesis, and you're going to end up dealing 6 damage to Screaming Nemesis. You can just go right to the face to your opponent and make life very difficult for them. And as this deck has a lot of incidental, damage to the face between like Heartfire Hero, Screaming Nemesis, and then actual burn and Lightning Strike and Shock, which also doubles like very good removal spells that allow you to kind of get in with your Heartfire Hero plus Manifold Mouse, that's being like a very potent like turn 1, turn 2 play where you can have a 2/2 double striker on turn 2, and then when you actually have mana up and you're able to play something like a Snakeskin Veil to protect it, maybe play a Monstrous Rage to make it even bigger, even a Bushwhack to be able to kind of clear the way for this Heartfire Hero. And of course Bushwhack, after the Heartfire Hero has gotten to be massive, ends up being pretty good, because then this allows you to go like Monstrous Rage onto it. Ends up getting a counter up to a 3/3, the roll up to a 4, ends up being a 6/4 Bushwhack. It's going to be able to just fight whatever, and then you're able to throw the Heartfire Hero at it. Even at times getting to fight your own Screaming Nemesis, I believe. Oh, yeah, creature you don't control. That would be kind of sick, actually. Reading the card explains the card, ladies and gentlemen. But, Bushwhack just being a very good way to kind of get triggers and then fight bigger creatures, get rid of them, and then Heartfire Hero especially, or even Screaming Nemesis as well, to run it into your opponent's like Big Demon. We know that Dimir Demons was a pretty big deck in the World Championship. Like imagine fighting a 6/6 and you just get to 6 your opponent in the face for 1 green mana. It ends up being like one of the best burn spells, only in the case of Screaming Nemesis. The mana base, pretty straightforward. We have 4 Copperline Gorge. This is the fast land cycle of cards. Whereas the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer other lands. So this will come into play untapped. If it's your 3rd land, if it's your 4th land, it will come into play tapped. Repollution Forest adds a green and a red, but it deals the damage to you, or it taps for a colorless mana. Restless Ridgeline is a man land that comes into play tapped, taps for a green or a red, and then for 2 and a red and a green, it becomes a 3/4 green dinosaur creature until end of turn. And when it attacks, another target attacking creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. You untap that creature, meaning that you can trigger some of the Valiant triggers off of something like an Emberheart Challenger or a Heartfire Hero with Restless Ridgeline. Obviously not ideal because it is a land that comes into play tapped early on. Well, actually at all points, but it is kind of a decent mana sink when you put into it. Rockface Village being a little bit more narrow of a card. It doesn't help cast like your other spells. It only helps cast your creatures. But it does have this ability of tapping a red and tapping it to give a lizard, mouse, otter, or raccoon +1/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. This is like a way that you can trigger, your Emberheart Challengers or your Heartfire Heroes without having any physical, like non-land permanents on the board to be able to get their Valiant triggers, which is really nice there. And if you end up having just some extra mana lying around, you're able to play one of those creatures. Then, especially in the case of like the Heartfire Hero or the Manifold Mouse, you're able to get haste right off the rip and be able to attack with it, giving it +1/+0 as well when, Manifold Mouse can give something trample or double strike, and then you already have, Heartfire Hero that's going to be able to benefit from that extra point of power because if it ends up dying, it's going to end up dealing damage to your opponent is just absolutely insane there. Thornspire Verge is new from the Duskmourn set, where it taps for a red, but then will add a green mana only if you control a mountain or a forest. We have 5 basic mountains in the deck, and we want more red mana anyway than we want green. So Thornspire Verge taps for a color that we need, while also if we find any one of our 5 mountains, we're going to be able to play for our green spells as well as just us having a bunch of lands that will tap for green mana anyway, so it's not indicative that the Thornspire Verge ends up adding green mana to our mana pool, until maybe a little bit later in the game. Sideboard, pick your poison. I think the Demons deck is very powerful. I also think that the Unholy Annex and everything like that is just super powerful. So pick your poison is just a very good card here to kind of get rid of them. And then maybe people playing some of the other big domain decks where they're playing like Atraxa, this is like a way that you can get rid of it. Them gaining a ton of life is super bad for you, even with like a Screaming Nemesis. Like them just gaining 7 life isn't necessarily the end of the world, but it does make life just a little bit harder. So pick your poison is just a very decent sideboard card. Snakeskin Veil for a little bit more protection. Torch the Tower for some early game removal. It's going to exile the creature, so you're able to actually kill a Heartfire Hero if it's relatively small, and then you're able to get rid of it, and it's not going to trigger its death trigger to end up dealing you some damage. So it's pretty nice there. We have Innkeeper's Talent, which is like a way that these Gruul decks before used to target and like re-trigger their Valiant abilities. They also had Manifold Mouse, but like Innkeeper's Talent also just having some built-in protection. If you're willing to spend a little bit of mana into it, you can pay green. Permanents you control with counters on them have Ward 1, so just having your opponent have to pay extra mana to kind of essentially go 1-for-1 with a lot of your creatures in the early parts of the game. And when you're playing a creature every turn, and this is just putting counters on them for free, and then also giving them Ward 1, and your opponent really having to kind of choose what creatures they have to deal with, without really being able to add to the board very efficiently, is just an annoying thing to deal with. But I think in general is a little bit slower with a lot of the other kind of like Gruul aggro or mono red aggro decks kind of going around. So I think Innkeeper's Talent definitely is like a little bit more of a grindier card, allows you to kind of pile up onto one creature. And of course, if you just have extra mana lying around, you're going to be able to put 2 counters on a creature, or in the case of like Heartfire Hero, it's going to be able to put 2 creatures on it, or 2 counters, on itself, or Questing Druid be able to get more counters as well. Things like that. Snakeskin Veil putting more counters on it. It ends up doing a lot, honestly, for virtually 3 mana, and then once you pay 7 mana into it, it ends up being kind of a house of a card if your opponent's not able to kind of adequately deal with it. We have a Obliterating Bull here, 2 mana, deal 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker. If that creature or planeswalker will die this turn, exile instead. Also kind of good against the other Heartfire Hero creatures of the world. Paw Patch formation, we see for a lot of like the flying creatures. This has 3 relevant modes on it. Destroying your creature with flying, destroy target enchantment, or you can just draw a card, make a food token. It's just going to be able to be flexible. Is like if you don't really need this card right now, you get it, like you top deck it. It's a little bit better than Pick Your Poison, where your opponent sacrifices one of those things. Maybe they have multiples. This allows you to target it, and again, if it's not a relevant card, you just can end up cycling it away and creating a food token, which may or may not be helpful. Maybe if you're in like a racing situation, gaining that 3 life could be the difference between your opponent being able to all out attack, or at least have to think about their attack step. Lastly, we have Questing Druid here. Again, you'll be able to go up to the full 4 and be a little bit more grindier of a deck than, you know, a lot of the other, you know, the mono red decks when playing against something like Gorgori mid range, or any of the other, like even Dimir mid range to a point. You know, Questing Druid just allows you to play a little bit more at instant speed and get some card advantage going, while also having a threat kind of inbound that, you know, you can end up just playing on turn 3, hopefully playing a land, and then maybe getting to hold up another spell, so you're able to kind of protect the Questing Druid and start loading up counters on it, and then making it a very difficult creature to kind of answer. And that is the Gruul aggro deck, or Gruul Prowess, excuse me, for the standard format. It's kind of weird to say. This is like the first time we've looked at a standard deck in a very long time, and like its own dedicated video, rather than going over something like a standard meta game, or looking at any of the pro tours and things like that. So if you are interested in looking at more standard decks, I implore you, please subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments down below. Helps out with the algorithm, but also helps me out too if there's specific decks that the community wants to see kind of go over and talk about. I want to kind of know those decks so I can do some pretty deep studying on those decks specifically, instead of just making videos on other decks that people really don't care about, or maybe are really tired of. But, you know, that's going to do it for me in this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Again, if you did, please subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, leave a like on the video, comment down below what videos you would want to see next. But that's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed it. I hope to see you all in the next one.